Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if it is your first time checking us out. Hey, today we're gonna talk about the things you need to consider outside of the house itself whenever you're building a custom home. All right, everybody, so like I said, today we're gonna talk about some things you really need to think about outside of the house, which might sound kind of strange, but outside of the house whenever you're building a custom home. And the reason I say this, it comes up quite often that most people, whenever you build a custom home, it's typically not on kind of, I guess I'll say a quote unquote normal subdivision lot. It's usually on an acreage lot or a little bit bigger parcel, excuse me, than what kind of your quote unquote normal house would be, right? So what are some of those things that you really need to think about? I think the first thing, and this is really, I call it kind of property layout. So as we say, hey, we've got a 2.5 acre lot, whatever the size is, we've got a lot and it's gonna be more than just the main house on it. What else are we gonna do on this lot? How's it gonna be landscaped? It's a lot of other factors, but you really need to think through that to begin with. Now, a lot of the times in a lot of municipalities, you have to do what's called a site plan. Right at the very beginning, has to get submitted with your house prints so you can get everything approved by the local building department, whoever it might be. And again, I know that's not the same everywhere, but a lot of places are like that. So if you have, the big thing that comes to mind first and foremost is if you have any additional structures. So say if you have, maybe you're gonna put up an accessory dwelling unit, like a mother-in-law suite or something like that, where you're actually gonna have a separate, maybe like a small 1 bed, 1 bath, separate structure on the property. Where's that gonna go? Maybe you're just gonna have a barn. Maybe you need a big toy barn. You got a lot of toys you wanna put in there, you know, four-wheelers, snowmobiles, whatever it might be. A lot of people like to have an RV garage, so they have a larger RV, but they don't want that necessarily that RV storage garage attached directly to the house. A lot of times they want that as a separate structure. So really just kind of trying to think out what's the property layout going to be like as far as, you know, where's my driveway coming in? Where's my main house going to be? Where's my barn going to be? Where's my accessory dwelling unit going to be? Well, how's all that stuff lay out? And I always recommend to people definitely think about storage for sure, because a lot of people, especially if it's a custom home that's on acreage, you might have some extra things that maybe you wouldn't have if you were just in a subdivision with a home in a subdivision. Maybe you have a small lawn and garden tractor. Maybe you have a little bit bigger tractor because you have a lot of mowing you have to do. Whatever it might be, you might have more, I guess I'll just say, stuff that you need to store somewhere, maybe some implements for the tractor, stuff like that. So think about those storage facilities that you're gonna have on the property, if you're gonna have any, as you're laying everything out, because a big thing is aesthetics. You wanna make sure that wherever, however you kind of lay out the property, it's just, you drive into the driveway, you want the home to be the focus, maybe a nice barn if it, you know, if it kind of matches the house or if it's a good looking structure. What you don't want to do is you drive in the driveway and you have some, you know, maybe you're trying to save some money, which is perfectly fine. So you have just like a real basic storage facility to put some of your stuff in, but that's the first thing you see when you come on the property. Most people want the home to be the focal point. Like I said, the home and or a barn if they have a really nice barn whenever you come on the property. So think about the layout of those things so that you don't make a mistake that you really can't fix later. So the aesthetics are a big piece of it. And kind of with that, I'll say utilities as well. Really, electric's the big one. Most electric nowadays is going to be underground anyway, but somewhere around the house you're going to have, you know, it's typically a green box, you know, that's maybe like 3 feet by 2 feet or 4 feet by 3 feet, something like that, and then a pedestal that's going to have your meter on it. So those things, ideally, we like to locate kind of away from the house, at least away from the main line of sight of the house. So maybe it's on like the side of the house, away from the house. Now, of course, where the electric is going to come into the house, however it's designed, where the main electric panel is going to be, there's some things obviously that are kind of set in stone to some degree, but wherever you can put that electric pedestal and that transformer box so that it's not a focal point, kind of try to mix it in the trees if you have trees. If there's no trees on the property, kind of try to, you know, just orient it a certain way that it's not going to be too far from the house. And of course, this is something your builder is going to talk with you about if you ask the question, but you know, it can't be more than, typically you don't want it more than a couple hundred feet from the property or from the house itself. So there's some things to work through, but definitely just any of those, those things you're going to see when you come onto the property, you want to orient the property in a way so that the focal point is the home or like I said, a nice barn, not all these other little things kind of like placed around the property that you see when you first come in. So aesthetics of property layout. It's a long way to say that. Aesthetics of property layout, very, very important. And then the next thing is just any exterior features. So think about, hey, where am I gonna have sprinklers at? Now this is kind of something in today's world you consider no matter where you're building a house at, is my sprinkler system. Well, in a custom home, you might have a bigger yard area, or you might have some more special features. Maybe you're gonna have a big water feature in the middle of a circle driveway. Maybe you wanna have some other, shrubs and things, and maybe a garden bed on the property. So do you wanna have sprinklers, some water lines run to those? Man, it's a whole lot easier to do all that stuff and plan for it ahead of time because as an example, maybe you have a raised garden bed, but it's across the driveway, tucked in this cool little spot. Well, you just got the asphalt done on your driveway, and now you got to figure out how to get a sprinkler line over there because you only had it stubbed out whenever you first built the house. And now they've got to trench, way around the driveway, or worst case scenario, they've got to bust up some driveway. They got to try to get underneath the driveway, whatever it is. So even if you don't have things totally figured out, anywhere where you may potentially in the future want to cross underneath a hard surface, definitely recommend run a sleeve, a piece of PVC pipe underneath that so you can run a water line underneath there for a sprinkler. Now, if it's electrical, it's a little bit different. It's got to be buried at a certain depth and things like that. But just planning ahead for sprinklers or water lines anywhere on the property that you might want them. The next thing is really, I'm going to say additional electric. And the main thing that comes to mind when I think about this is a lot of custom homes, a lot of homes we do, they're going to have an entry gate. So there are some solar options for sure. That can be a great option if there's no electric available or if it's a really long run to the end of the driveway. But most people, if they're going to have a gate, it's going to be an electric gate and kind of the keypad thing. They want to have electric run to it so they don't have to hassle with it. Well, that's something you want to do ahead of time when you're building that, whenever you're getting everything trenched for the property and your electrician's out there running the main line into the house. Make sure that they take the time to run an electric line all the way out to wherever that gate's going to be. That's a super convenient thing to do at the very beginning, but can be a huge pain to do later. Again, if you're waiting to do it later, now you got to figure out how to get the line back out of the electrical panel, back outside, and how are you going to get that trench? Are there any hard surfaces you're going to have to cross? Things like that. So electric line for a gate, and really just any other additional electric that you're going to have. Another thing that comes to mind is, I think it's cool when clients do this, but they might have a place on the property where it's kind of like just a big meadow or a field, and it's going to be their party place. They're going to put up big tents in the summertime. They're going to have barbecues, things like that. Maybe they're going to have live music out there, right? So maybe you want to run some additional electric out there and put some exterior grade outlets out there kind of on the edge of the meadow, whatever it might be. If it's not too far from the home, or maybe you can run it out of the barn if you have electric in the barn. So any of those electrical needs, man, think of that ahead of time on the property, anywhere where it's going to be, just like water lines, sprinkler lines, electrical, super important too. And I'm telling you, it's a whole lot easier to do it at the beginning than trying to go back and retrofit that. And if the budget doesn't support it, you can at least plan ahead for those things. Like I said, maybe you can, for the electrical, maybe you have electric run back out of the house, out of the main panel in the home, and maybe it's in an underground, meets code box that's, watertight and all that stuff, of course, whatever your local code requires. But maybe you at least have that plan so that in the future, if you want to run that electric somewhere else, you can tie into that without trying to go back into the house. So electric and water, very, very important. Anywhere on the property you want them, it's a whole lot easier to plan ahead and do it at the very beginning. Another thing that comes up nowadays is surveillance. A lot of custom homes, they can be a little bit larger property. Maybe they want to have some surveillance, maybe some cameras around the property, or at least maybe out at the gate. So thinking about, okay, we're going to have a camera at the gate. I mean, a lot of homes nowadays have cameras in the house, the Ring doorbell and everything else. But a lot of people might want to have maybe a camera out at the gate. So how are you going to get that video feed back to the house so that you can see it on your monitor? Or a lot of people just kind of have a program where they can switch on their TV to a different in feed and different feed, and then they can see all their cameras. So how are you going to get that back? Again, just things to think about. And you got to think through little details too. Talk to like your low voltage guy if you're using surveillance, and your electrician, because if you try to run a surveillance low voltage line in the same trench that your electric goes out to the gate, you're going to have big problems. You're going to have all kinds of interference. Your picture's not going to be clear, and it's just going to be a hassle. So Again, thinking through the details ahead of time, these are the things that a great builder is really gonna help you think through to make sure you set yourself up for success at the very beginning versus being extremely frustrated when either A, your stuff doesn't work right, or B, you can't retrofit it the way you wanted to without a huge hassle. So think about any of that surveillance stuff as well and just make sure you have all that tied back in. We always recommend to people is even if you think you may put cameras on the house, if you want it to be hardwired like a lot of people kind of do, run those lines ahead of time so they're up in the attic, run them all back to a central location wherever your control panel or your control device is going to be for security. Just do that stuff ahead of time so you're not trying to mess with it later, even if you don't want to or you end up not putting cameras up. I mean, I don't want to say it's pennies on the dollar in comparison, but it's not a big cost to do that stuff at the very beginning versus trying to go back and retrofit it later. The last thing that I'll mention that I think is important to think about as you're talking about not just the house, but other stuff associated with building a custom home are going to be those outdoor entertainment areas. So think fire pits, fireplaces, things like that. And again, if the budget doesn't support it at the very beginning, but you know you really want to have this huge fire pit so you feel like you're sitting outside of the ski resort, in Aspen, and it's just this massive fire. Think about that stuff ahead of time because there's a lot of things you need to plan for. You can't just, if you're gonna have a gas fire pit out there, you don't want it to be wood because of the smoke maybe, you want it to be natural gas or propane. You're gonna have to run that line. You're gonna have to have a place to tie it into the house, but also whenever your plumber comes, your HVAC folks come to do all the gas lines in the house, whenever they come up with a plan and get it approved by the building department, all those calculations have to be factored in to make sure that the main gas line is sized appropriately. Because if you have too small of a line coming into the house and then down the road, you're like, hey, I'm just gonna tie into this piece of black gas pipe in the basement in the unfinished space and run it out to the backyard. I'm gonna put this huge massive fire pit out there. You might run into a problem when your wife tries to turn on the cooktop at the same time you're sitting out back with your buddies in the fire pit and all of a sudden you don't have enough gas to run everything, nothing's working right. So planning ahead, again, you don't have to do it right off the bat. It's definitely gonna be easier and overall probably less expensive to just do it at the very beginning, but definitely think about that stuff ahead of time so you don't run into problems down the road where, like I said, either A, it doesn't work, or B, it's just a huge pain in the butt to try to retrofit it. So fire pits, anything with gas lines, that's the big takeaway there, I think, is anything with gas lines. So let me just recap real quick, just a couple things. So anything you're gonna have water lines, anywhere you're gonna have water lines on the property, plan for it ahead of time. It's a lot easier to trench it and put them in right at the beginning, but at least plan ahead so you have a plan of how you're gonna make it happen in the future. Electric lines, that's a big one, man. Like a lot of people don't really think about, oh, it'd be nice to have an outlet over here or in the backyard or out by my fire pit. Maybe I wanna have an outlet out there so I can, I was gonna say plug in your radio, but I guess now it's probably wireless anyway. But whatever, you might wanna have a device plugged in out there by the fire pit. So anywhere where you're gonna have electric, the gate's a big one. Think about that stuff ahead of time. Again, easier to trench it in and just do it at the beginning, but if budget doesn't allow, at least plan ahead so you've got a way where you can do that after the fact that's not gonna be too intrusive with the main home itself. And then, like I said, anywhere where you're gonna have gas line, that's a big thing. Gas line, make sure everything is sized appropriately. Again, you're gonna wanna talk with your builder about this, lay out all the, I won't say requirements, but the wants and needs that you have for the home and the property overall. Make sure you talk through with the builder so the builder is right on the same page with you so they can plan everything right from the beginning. And then the last thing is, man, just aesthetics of the property. Definitely take the time, get that site plan, stand out there with, whoever's involved in the decision-making process, stand out there on site with your builder, figure out where you want the house, how you want it oriented before everything gets staked out, figure out where you want your toy shed, figure out where you want, the storage facility, storage for your tractor or whatever it is. Just think about all that stuff ahead of time. So when everything's said and done and that gate swings open for the first time and you're driving down the driveway to your brand new custom home property, everything is exactly the way you imagine it and everything is just picture perfect. So it's worth it to plan it ahead, do it right the first time versus trying to go back and do it after the fact. And I won't lie, there's some personal experience speaking right here. I definitely did some things that I wish I would have done a little bit different. I don't think anything's ever perfect the first time, but man, just plan ahead and try to really think through all those details. So as always, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out. We build here we're based in Colorado Springs, build across the state of Colorado, but happy to answer any questions I can for you. And if you're in the state of Colorado, love to see if we may potentially be a good fit to build for you, or at least have a conversation to see if we might be a fit. And hey, if it's good information, love for everybody to take the time, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell so you get all the notifications. We're trying to give you guys a new video at least one a week just to keep you up to date on what's going on in custom home building. Take care.